When was the last time that you got yourself some hoo-ha? I'm afraid I don't know what you mean by that, apologized the president with a soft smile. They had put him in the room again, the oval one, but this time the chair he sat in had a paper cover over it, like the examination table at the doctor's office, and it crinkled loudly each time he shifted his weight. The boy sat on the edge of the desk, swinging his legs uproariously, and rephrased the question. When was the last time that you just really grabbed a good old handful of ass? I mean, come on. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development is just asking for it when she works those skirts. Joe laughed, not remembering that Betsy May, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, was a dour, leathery, wrinkled woman in her early 70s. Yeah, well, scarcity drives up prices and quality down. Econ 101, man, drawled the boy. I never understood that Monica Lewinsky bullshit until I laid my eyes on the White House interns that you've got around here. Where the hell do they recruit these interns from? The Pound? Joe laughed again, and this time his bladder released a stream of warmth into the front of his pants. Jesus Christ, Jack Kennedy was knee-deep in fucking pussy, and you nearly get the boot just because you stick your hand up some staffer's skirt when you were in the Senate. Get the fuck out of here. I don't remember that. Oh, you fucking remember, snapped the boy, cutting him off mid-sentence. The president stared blankly at the desk, his eyes brimming with the arrival of tears. Oh, cheer up, said the boy blithely. Do you want to remember Sally Winter's tits? The boy slid off the desk and turned to face the president, bringing his face once more to his eye level. It's okay, the boy said quietly. This will make you feel better. And Joe lifted his head and their eyes met again. The summer had been kind to Sally. The sun had browned her skin and reduced the ranks of anger-red pimples that had plastered her face only a few months ago. She had lost some weight, too, as she had taken to riding her bike in the early morning before the sun could drench the air with heat. Joe hadn't recognized her that first morning, as she had made her way down the steep incline of the gangway that connected the firm stanchions of the pier to the small dock which gently rocked beneath the onslaught of the sea. Joe noticed her long brown legs first as she descended, and he panted, slightly out of breath, from his last set of push-ups. When she reached the dock, she had turned and walked to the opposite end, stripped off her shoes and socks, and dangled her feet in the cool salt water. Joe sauntered over, his ego engorged by the rush of blood to invigorated muscles. Good morning, he said jauntily, as he walked towards her. Good morning, Joe, she replied loftily without turning her head. Joe stopped in his tracks, flummoxed by the unexpected familiarity. Do I know you? Stammered Joe, some of his ego deflated. The girl sighed and turned towards him, her long brown hair sweeping away from her face with the shoreward wind. It's Sally from fourth period English. Oh, hey, Sally, he said, slowly forcing the embarrassment out of his voice as he recovered himself. Gosh, sorry I didn't recognize you. That's okay, said Sally in a voice of feigned resignation. I forgive you because you are absolutely obnoxious. Joe laughed and he plopped himself down beside her, having regained his cool. They talked for an hour that morning, mostly about nothing, and he had been late to football practice where Coach Greg had made him run laps around the field until he puked. They had continued meeting for the rest of the summer, in the warm, early, quiet hours of a kindling youth. And then one day they had been sitting on the dock, closer than friends but still not touching, and Joe had brushed her hand with his. He had hoped that this would be the morning that she would let him kiss her, but instead she had abruptly stood up. Let's go for a swim, she said suddenly, and before he could reply she began removing her shirt. He was stunned. He had never seen a bikini outside of a James Bond movie, and before he could quite register what he was seeing, she had already shimmied out of her shorts and leapt into the sea. The water that splashed his face woke him from his stupor, and he quickly followed suit. They had swam and laughed for a few minutes until they had found themselves inextricably drawn towards one another in the water, and they had bobbed merely inches apart as though they were suspended, not by the waves, but by a single moment in time. "That was a good one," sighed the boy as he straightened up. The president groaned as he struggled to maintain his erection, like a small man laboring to hold a giant sword. The knock came in 2 quick and purely ceremonial taps before the door opened, and the vice president stuck her head inside, like an eel probing the crevice of some new rock. She said nothing as she closed the door behind her, and they stared at each other for a few moments in the dimness. The boy had gone, and he was alone again amongst strangers. "Who are you?" asked the president, his voice sounding strangled and desperate as he was still overwhelmed by the previous bout of stimulation. "What a stupid question," scoffed the vice president. "I think that a far better question would be, who are you?" Joe shrank into his chair, and perhaps the best question of all would be, why does it smell like piss in the Oval Office? All the warmth had left the president's crotch, and now he was stiff and wet and cold. "Leave me alone," he moaned softly. "As you wish," she said, with a chuckle, and was gone, her sudden absence equally as quiet and abrupt as her arrival. "That bitch wants you fucking gone," the boy said as he reemerged from the shadows. "I know," groaned the president, drawing out the last word like the buzzing of a drone. "Do you remember what happened next?" asked the boy, his voice loaded like a bullet in the chamber of a revolver. "It doesn't matter." "Oh, I think it does," contradicted the boy, and in a few quick motions he stood behind the president and gripped his head with his fingers. That night he and Sally had fucked in the deep green grass of the athletic fields above the high school. He had brought with him the only piece of equipment that he had thought was necessary, but Sally had had the foresight to bring along a blanket, and afterwards they had laid there with small messy pyramids of discarded clothing flanking them on either side, the warmth of the night's humidity caressing their skin as they laid intertwined with one another. They had breathed quietly together until she had playfully nibbled on the lobe of his ear. "Hey," he said with mock sharpness, "you had better watch out. One day I'm going to be President of the United States." "Oh, really?" she giggled speculatively. "Then tell me, Mr. President," she said with the serious intonation of a TV journalist, "what will your first act as president be?" "Why don't I show you instead?" he replied lecherously. They had continued seeing each other for the rest of the summer, and their passion had burned like the wildfires out west, consuming acres of combustibles. But once the fall rains had come, and the steady beat of life had resumed and broken the summer's doldrums, they had slowly drifted apart. But the idea of the presidency, which had been conceived only moments after his first sexual adventure, remained, and he had oriented himself in the sloppy, good-natured way of a natural politician towards that misty chain of archipelagos which plots a course through the seas of uncertainty, and ever onwards towards an infinite horizon. "And you fucking did it. You are now President of the United fucking States." Joe clenched his eyes tight, not wanting to believe. Oh, he cried softly, cradling his head in his hands. "But you won't be for long if that stupid whore has anything to do with it. It's either her or it's us, don't you see? And what can you do? You are sitting here drenched in your own piss. You need me. We need me. And all you have to do is ask for my help. Do you want my help?" "Yes," sobbed the president through constricted vocal cords. "Please help." "Well, all right then," grinned the boy, and his straight white teeth gleamed against the dark like all the sins of man's creation.